Hi everybody. Thank you for asking me to do this NCFR. I'm excited to make a few comments for you. And Zach, that was an awesome, amazing presentation. I definitely learned things. Those of you that are watching this webinar are not allowed to judge me based on what you just saw, because I'm sure that my slides are not going to fit all of Zach's recommendations. So there's that. I did want to follow up on one point that Zach made, which was his final point about turning the page. If a mistake happens, that's okay. And I was reminded of some research that shows that when individuals are evaluating others, that they tend to like people who aren't completely perfect. So if you make a mistake, think to yourself, okay, well maybe the audience will actually like me better because I wasn't completely perfect. So don't put too much pressure on yourself and just do your best job and you will be awesome. So to get started, the facilitator in a lightning session has a bit more of an active role. It's even more important that people stay on time. So we're going to be thinking about that. But to start with, hopefully you'll receive papers 2 weeks in advance of the conference and maybe even prepare a few discussion questions for each paper. Nothing's worse as a facilitator or a presenter as having the presentations occur and then everyone's just sitting there and nobody asks any questions. So having 1 or 2 questions for each one to kind of get things started. Usually once the talking starts, the conversation will get going, especially if you ask a question that might have the opportunity to bring up some more issues that other people might be thinking about. So definitely preparing a few questions for each paper is a good idea. You'll introduce each presenter at the beginning of the session, and sometimes I'll email ahead of time and ask people for a little bit of information about themselves, like where they've published maybe, or I'll say, hey, can you write me a little bio? I might ask them what point of their program they are. And sometimes it's grad students making these presentations, and it's really nice. It can help them, people in the audience, to kind of get to know who they are. So introduce each presenter at the beginning of the session. Next up is monitoring the timing of the session and the starts and ends of each presentation. And that's, like I said, more important in this lightning session. So ideally, everybody has followed all of Zach's tips and everything is automated and the presentation automatically ends at the end of 8 minutes. But things happen, somebody might go over on a slide and then start messing with the slides, and that might mess up the timing. It's possible that they get to the last slide, the presentation ends, and they just keep talking. So it's going to be important that you keep people on time. So first thing you probably want to think about is talking to them, the presenters, and saying, hey, just a heads up, I'm going to be really careful about making sure that we all stay on time, because we only have so many minutes and we have several presentations. So let's get everything queued up and ready to go, and whenever it's your turn to present, I'm going to be pretty strict about enforcing 8 minutes. I don't have a hook to pull you off, but I am going to be gently kind of wrapping things up, and when I stand up you're going to know that it's time to wrap up. So that might be a way to nicely warn people before you get started that you're going to have to be pretty strict about the time. Then of course the final role of the presenter is to facilitate the question and answer at the end. I like to let the audience ask questions first, and if no one has a question, then move to my questions. I inevitably always have questions. But one thing I really like about lightning sessions is a lot of times I'll be in a presentation, and the presentation will be the normal length kind of presentation, 15 to 20 minutes. And a lot of the intro I already know because I'm in the session, I'm interested in that topic. And I just want to get to my questions and getting my questions answered and get to a conversation. So that's one thing I really like about the lightning sessions, is that it gives you, you're not sitting there ruminating about your question while someone's droning on and on. It's quick, one and done. And the nice thing is that because they're shorter, people might have more questions, more clarifying questions, and you can have a richer discussion. So that Q&A can be really satisfying and interesting in a lightning session. So obviously you want to allow yourself plenty of time to locate the meeting room. You do not want to be there late. That's embarrassing. So make sure you figure out where you're going. You want to get all the equipment in order, make sure the room is in order. Make sure that everybody has a chair at the table if people are going to sit in the front. Sometimes people like to sit in the front, sometimes people like to sit in the audience. It's usually nice if people are sitting in the front, at least for the Q&A portion, because then you can easily talk to everybody as opposed to kind of twisting around in your seat depending on where the person asking the question is. It's nice to have water to allow people the opportunity to wet their throat when they're talking if they need it, and of course having writing utensils. Sometimes you'll get those questions that are 3 or 4 different parts, and you're thinking to yourself, now what was that? So having the pen allows you to kind of take notes on each part of the question so that you make sure when you answer it you've hit every single part. You can introduce yourself to the presenters when you get there, obviously, and make sure you're pronouncing their names right. My name gets mispronounced all the time, so I like to tell the facilitators, Dush rhymes with rush or brush. Remind them of the time constraints that you have, like I said earlier. You can make a little bit of small talk, put people at ease, and help ease any presentation jitters. So the facilitator job is kind of the easy job here, that you don't have to worry about actually doing the presentation. So kind of getting people talking, saying good luck, starting a conversation, that can kind of help put people at ease and make them a little bit less nervous about this presentation. Just a few final tips. During the question and answer session, sometimes you'll get those speakers that kind of drone on. And it's awkward sometimes to try to interject because you're worried about hurting somebody's feelings, but when you're in the room and that's happening, oftentimes you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, just get to the point. So if it seems like it's going beyond like 2 minutes, for example, you might, and it doesn't seem like there's a point in sight, you might say to the speaker, to the audience member, hey, do you have a question? I just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to get all of their questions in. And usually they'll say, oh, sorry, yeah, here's my question. And it's not very shameful. It's okay. Sometimes people talk, so I wouldn't be worried about hurting someone's feelings, but I do think it's nice when you're in the audience to make sure that those people that kind of drone on, their question gets asked so that other people have a chance to ask their question. You might also have a speaker that's kind of droning on, and that's a possibility, and you could kind of follow the same kind of strategy. Those are really great thoughts. Thank you for sharing them, but I'm going to move on because I know we had a few other people with questions, and make sure that they get a chance to ask their questions as well. And just being really nice about it and smiling, and people will usually not be offended. Oftentimes you don't even realize because maybe you're kind of nervous that you're even doing that. So, and again, it helps everybody else in the audience who might be thinking in their head, I really want to be able to ask my question. This person is not going to stop talking. I'm not going to have that opportunity. Finally, you want to make sure you end on time. Nothing's worse than being in the hallway waiting for your presentation and the other session before yours hasn't wrapped up yet. So by the time that wraps up, you're completely stressed out because you have to get in, get your presentations loaded, figure all that out. And especially if you're followed by another lightning session and you just did one, you know how long it takes to make sure that the PowerPoints are working correctly and that everything is going correct. So make sure that you end on time, and that might mean you have to cut somebody off. And again, using that same strategy, I'm sorry, but I'm going to cut our conversation off here because we have another session coming in. Thank you all so much for this really interesting conversation and amazing session. Thank you, presenters. You all did a great job. And let's continue these conversations. Let's move out to the hall, and we can continue to have these kinds of discussions about these topics. So saying something like that can help ease that transition and wrap up the session for those people that want to get to another session. Maybe they're afraid of being rude, and so they're really hoping that the session gets wrapped up so they can get to their next session, and it will help those people that are waiting for their session to start and need to get their things loaded and ready to go. So that is my tips on facilitating a lightning session. And thank you again, NCFR, for asking me. And I hope that you all really enjoy these sessions.